When laid out in front of you, it should be instantly clear what it means. If you have to study it to understand it, someone is probably trying to pull something over on you. Popular with the educated elite of the Greco-Roman Empire, and with thinkers like Montaigne, John Stuart Mill, and Tom Wolfe, Stoicism has just a few central teachings. It sets out to remind us of how unpredictable the world can be, how brief our moment of life is, how to be steadfast and strong, and in control of yourself. And finally, that the source of our dissatisfaction lies in our impulsive dependency on our reflexive senses rather than logic. If this were your average introduction to philosophy, we would have to talk about how Stoicism was started. Stoa means porch, where the early followers used to hold meetings, and when it began. I happen to think that the history of a philosophy is less interesting than its proponents and applications. So, for a change, let's spend our time on the latter. Stoicism had three principal leaders. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of the Roman Empire, the most powerful man on earth, sat down each day to write himself notes about restraint, compassion, and humility. Epictetus endured the horrors of slavery to found his own school where he taught many of Rome's greatest minds. Seneca, when Nero turned on him and demanded his suicide, could think only of comforting his wife and friends. Stoicism differs from most existing schools in one important sense. Its purpose is practical application. It is not an intellectual enterprise. It's a tool that we can use to become better entrepreneurs, better friends, and better people. Stoic writing isn't about beating up on yourself or pointing out the negative. It's a meditative technique that transforms negative emotions into a sense of calm and perspective. It's easy to gloss over the fact that Marcus Aurelius was the Roman emperor without truly absorbing the gravity of that position. Emperors were deities, ordinary men with direct access to unlimited wealth and adulation. Before you jump to the conclusion that the Stoics were dour and sad men, ask yourself, if you were a dictator, what would your diary look like? How quickly could it start to resemble? It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself for difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it is the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs. Seneca, who enjoyed great wealth as the advisor of Nero, suggested that we ought to set aside a certain number of days, each month, to practice poverty. Take a little food, wear your worst clothes, get away from the comfort of your home and bed. Put yourself face to face with want, he said. You'll ask yourself, is this what I used to dread? It's important to remember that this is an exercise and not a rhetorical device. He doesn't mean think about misfortune. He means live it. Comfort is the worst kind of slavery because you're always afraid that something or someone will take it away. But if you can not just anticipate but practice misfortune, then chance loses its ability to disrupt your life. Montaigne was fond of an ancient drinking game where the members took turns holding up a painting of a corpse inside a coffin and cheered, "Drink and be merry, for when you're dead you will look like this." Emotions like anxiety and fear have their roots in uncertainty and rarely in experience. Anyone who has made a big bet on themselves knows how much energy both states can consume. The solution is to do something about that ignorance. Make yourself familiar with the things, the worst-case scenarios, that you're afraid of. Practice what you fear, whether a simulation in your mind or in real life. Then you, your company, and your employees will have little left to keep you from thinking and acting big. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics had an exercise called turning the obstacle upside down. What they meant to do was make it impossible to not practice the art of philosophy, because if you can properly turn a problem upside down, every bad becomes a new source of good. Suppose for a second that you are trying to help someone and they respond by being surly or unwilling to cooperate. Instead of making your life more difficult, the exercise says, they're actually directing you towards new virtues. For example, patience or understanding. Or, the death of someone close to you, a chance to show fortitude. Marcus Aurelius described it like this: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It should sound familiar because it is the same thinking behind Obama's teachable moments. Right before the election, Joe Klein asked Obama how he'd made his decision to respond to the Reverend Wright scandal. He said something like, "When the story broke, I realized the best thing to do wasn't damage control. It was to speak to Americans like adults." And what he ended up doing was turning a negative situation into the perfect platform for his landmark speech about race. The common refrain about entrepreneurs is that they take advantage of, even create opportunities. To the Stoic, everything is opportunity. The Reverend Wright scandal, a frustrating case where your help goes unappreciated, the death of a loved one, none of those are opportunities in the normal sense of the word. In fact, they are the opposite. They are obstacles. What a Stoic does is turn every obstacle into an opportunity. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, and the same thing happened to both. Marcus Aurelius. Run down the list of those who felt intense anger at something. The most famous, the most unfortunate, the most hated, the most whatever. Where is all that now? Smoke, dust, legend, or not even a legend? Think of all the examples, and how trivial the things we want so passionately are. Thanks, Ryan. Read it all and ran over all the material again. I think we're getting there. The piece should be uplifting and empowering without being defensive, so it will still take some working, but no worries. I'll be reading Epictetus tonight for more ideas. The part that bothers me is the entire "remember your small bit," which doesn't jive with startup founders. To do huge things, I really think you need to believe you can change the world and do so better than anyone else in some respect. It is possible, however, to simultaneously recognize that all is impermanent, the transient pains, bad PR, disloyal false friends, irrational exuberance, hitting a 1 on the NY Times, whatever. I think it's about not dwelling on pain and not clinging to ephemeral happiness. Enjoy it to the fullest. This is where I disagree with some of the Stoic writings. But don't expect it to last forever, nor expect some single point in time to make your entire life complete forever. Stoic writings are not arcane arguments for bespectacled professors. They are cognitive exercises proven to center practitioners, to humble them, to keep them free and appreciative. Stoic principles are often practiced in rehabilitation clinics with alcoholics so that coping mechanisms don't drive them to drink. One wouldn't view their new perspective on life as pessimistic or limiting. We celebrate the fact that for their first time in their lives, they are empowered and unburdened. We're all addicts in some respect, and we can all experience that same freedom. You can be a Stoic and joke around and have a happy life surrounded by what's valuable to you. In fact, that's the ultimate goal. Stoicism is ideal for the entrepreneurial life. The Stoics were writing honestly, often self-critically, about how they could become better people, be happier, and deal with the problems they faced. As an entrepreneur, you can see how practicing misfortune makes you stronger in the face of adversity, how flipping an obstacle upside down turns problems into opportunities, and how remembering how small you are keeps your ego manageable and in perspective. Ultimately, that's what Stoicism is about. It's not some systematic discussion of why or how the world exists. It is a series of reminders, tips, and aids for living a good life. Stoicism, as Marcus reminds himself, is not some grand instructor, but a balm, a soothing ointment to an injury wherever we might have one. Epictetus was right when he said that life is hard, brutal, punishing, narrow, and confining, a deadly business. We should take whatever help we can get, and it just happens that that help can come from ourselves. To finish, I want to share some of my favorite Stoic reminders. Look at them as short mental routines to run through often. Each is a quick reset to recalibrate yourself and be happy with the things that matter. Marcus Aurelius. So other people hurt me? That's their problem. Their character and actions are not mine. What is done to me is ordained by nature, and what I do by my own. Today I escaped from anxiety. Or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine, and so none of them can hurt me. Because your own strength is unequal to the task, do not assume that it is beyond the powers of man. But if anything is within the powers and province of man, believe that it is within your own compass also. Seneca, what progress have I made? I am beginning to be my own friend. That is progress indeed. Such a people will never be alone, and you may be sure he is a friend to all. Show me a man who isn't a slave, one who is a slave to sex, another to money, another to ambition. All are slaves to hope or fear. I could show you a man who has been a consul who is a slave to his little old woman, a millionaire who is the slave of a little girl in domestic service, and there is no state of slavery more disgraceful than one which is self-imposed. Count your years and you'll be ashamed to be wanting and working for exactly the same things as you wanted when you were a boy. Of this make sure against your dying day, that your faults die before you do. Nothing, to my way of thinking, is a better proof of a well-ordered mind than a man's ability to stop just where he is and pass some time in his own company. Cling tooth and nail to the following rule: not to give in to adversity, never to trust prosperity, and always take full note of Fortune's habit of behaving just as she pleases, treating her as if she were actually going to do everything that is in her power. This post is just a small sample of the kind of lessons, ideas, and stories we write about in our daily email newsletter. Every morning, we send a short, 500-word email inspired by Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and more. Each email will help you cultivate strength, insight, and wisdom to live your best life. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being, I'm going to do what I was born for. Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm? Marcus Aurelius. One of the most relatable moments in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is the argument Marcus Aurelius has with himself in the opening of Book 5. It's clearly an argument he's had with himself many times on many mornings, as have many of us. He knows he has to get out of bed, but so desperately wants to remain under the warm covers. It's relatable, but it's also impressive. Marcus didn't actually have to get out of bed. He didn't really have to do anything. One of his predecessors, Tiberius, basically abandoned the throne for an exotic island. Marcus's adopted great-grandfather, Hadrian, hardly spent any time in Rome at all. The emperor had all sorts of prerogatives, and here Marcus was insisting that he rise early and get to work. Why? It's because Marcus knew that winning the morning was key to winning the day and winning at life. He wouldn't have heard the expression that the early bird gets the worm, but he was well aware that a day well begun is half done. But it begs the question, what does winning the morning actually look like? What should one do after they wake up early? From the Stoics, we glean 3 habits that make the morning a success: journal, take a walk, do deep work. Let's look at each of those individually. The Stoics were big fans of journaling. If you're a daily Stoic subscriber, you've definitely heard us say that in an email or two. Epictetus, the slave, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, Seneca, the power broker and playwright. These 3 radically different men led radically different lives. But journaling, they all had that habit in common. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations consists of a collection of personal self-help notes, which he never intended to see the light of day. And Epictetus encouraged his students to write down their thoughts and reflect upon their actions every day. The Stoic keeps watch over himself as over an enemy lying in ambush, he said. The Stoics sought stillness. It is with a still mind that one does their best work. The paradox is that perhaps the single best way to still one's mind is to put the body in motion. Runners and cyclists will tell you that this is true, like an equation is true, that it is a fact. But you don't even have to go that far, or that hard, with your physical exertion to get what the Stoics were after. We should take wandering outdoor walks, Seneca said, so that the mind might be nourished and refreshed. Take a walk in the parking lot before you head into the office. Take a walk around the neighborhood. take a walk to the local coffee shop and back. By the time you're done, you'll be in the perfect headspace to concentrate on what's in front of you like a Roman, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Do it like it's the last and most important thing in your life. From his stepfather, Antoninus, Marcus learned how to work long hours, how to stay in the saddle. He writes in Meditations that he admired how Antoninus even scheduled his bathroom breaks so he could work for long, uninterrupted periods. Ryan Holiday talks about how he does 2 to 3 hours of deep work first thing when he gets to his office. James Clear, author of the wonderful bestseller Atomic Habits, told us on the Daily Stoic podcast that he carves out 2 sacred hours in the morning to do his writing. That's it. I know it probably doesn't seem like a lot, Holiday explains, but the Stoics knew that good work is realized by small steps. It's not a small thing, but good work is created in small steps. The day so easily gets away from us. Well-intentioned plans fall apart. Our willpower evaporates. So it's key that we prioritize the important things, and it's key that we habitualize doing them early. Well begun is half won, so get started. The single most important practice in Stoic philosophy is differentiating between what we can change and what we can't, what we have influence over, and what we do not. What does this look like in practice? Sports are a good example. An athlete can't control if the other team cheats or that refs always get the calls right. They can't control if people in the media know what they are talking about, or if they stake out positions just to be controversial or contrarian. They can't control the weather or the conditions on the field. So what does that leave? One thing, their own performance. As Marcus Aurelius would say, it doesn't matter what other people say or think. Your health? You're not crazy to worry. Bad things could happen related to any of them. A car accident, an economic downturn, a surprise diagnosis. But let's go backwards in time. A month, a year, 5 years ago. What were you worried about then? Mostly the same things, right? And how many of those worries came to pass? As Mark Twain quipped, I am an old man and have known a great many troubles, but most of them never happened. And even the ones that did come to pass, clearly the worrying didn't help stop it, right? It was Seneca who put the best one-liner to this feeling. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. So what I advise you to do is, Seneca continued, do not be unhappy before the crisis comes. We are in the habit of exaggerating, or imagining, or anticipating sorrow. Don't anticipate sorrow. Don't let anxiety and worry get the best of you. Don't let your worries grow out of proportion to what might actually happen. Don't let imagination overtake reality. Put it into practice. Next time you are feeling stressed or anxious, remind yourself, stay in the present. Focus on what you can control. Marcus Aurelius had an interesting metaphor. He believed that a man, an emperor, a soldier, everyone was like a rock. Throw the rock up in the air, he said, and it loses nothing by coming down and gained nothing by going up. The rock stays the same. We can imagine his own life mirror this analogy. He was an ordinary man plucked by Hadrian to become emperor, yet he could have been equally dethroned at any moment as well, and late in his reign nearly was. Did this change who Marcus was? Did it mean he was better or worse than other people? No, he was still the same rock, and so are you. Whether you have a day that begins with a promotion or ends with a firing, you're the same. Whether you win the lottery or file for bankruptcy, whether you address a crowd of thousands or have trouble getting your calls returned, the question is how we're going to respond to these swings of fate. If we can follow the lines of Kipling's classic poem, If. He was talking less of physical beauty, one imagines, than of true, beautiful human behavior, but actually it applies to both. A stunning woman whose looks are the result of her vanity and self-obsession will be rather unattractive when you get to know her. A man with strapping muscles acquired through steroids and a neglect of all other concerns is not really that impressive. Beauty, then, is difficult to separate from the intention, the choices which create it. So if you'd like to look better, that gives you a good place to start. In your choices, but also in your motivations and intentions. It's the decision to get out of bed early and go for a run, so you can be around to see your children grow up, not so you can look good in the mirror. Do your makeup because it gives you confidence, because the ritual of applying it is some quiet time to yourself. Not to cover up your flaws. Hire a trainer because you want to learn the discipline of weightlifting or boxing, not because you just want someone to tell you what to do. Things can get between you and your goal, of course, but nothing can stop you from getting started. Nothing can stop you from making a beautiful choice for yourself today. Put it into practice. Every time you are faced with a choice today, between walking the 15 minutes or taking an Uber, between picking up the phone to have the difficult conversation or leaving it to an email, between taking responsibility or hoping it goes unnoticed,